Hello, everybody. I'm Everton de Oliveira. I'm part of this very, very nice project. It's a very good initiative that we started some years ago and been working hard. And now we have our first product is almost ready to be released. And we have here the authors of our first book. We have many books coming. You're gonna listen the stories from their own mouth. They're gonna tell you what's going on. So we have here our friends, the authors of the first book. First, John, please introduce yourself like it's necessary, but please introduce yourself.
Hello, Everton. I'm here. I've driven in from the countryside and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much. Eileen, please introduce yourself.
I also drove in from the mountains so that I could have a decent internet to take this call.
Very good. Warren.
Yes, well, I'm just sheltering at home like most of the rest of us US folk. So it's nice to get a Zoom or actually talk to people. My wife, I've been married 60 some years, and we've probably discussed most things by now.
Well, but the audience has not. Ying, please introduce yourself.
I'm at home and working quietly away. Can't complain.
All right, thank you. You, Doug, please.
This is Doug Mackay. I used to be with UC Davis, and I am on the coast of Maine right now. And I just got off a boat a few minutes ago, so I'm hot and wet.
Yeah, we're jealous. I can see that.
Very much so.
Yes.
I have a little place in Canada that I can't get to because they won't let me cross the border. Those damn Canadians, John.
Well, he's minority now.
From Maine.
Okay, Eileen, I would like you to start. Talk about how this book came along. What's the idea and how you end up producing this nice book?
Well, a couple years ago, John called and asked if I could write a book about groundwater modeling. And I said, of course. And I had a look at his project and saw that he had many people, experts from around the globe, writing on the topics that they were experts in, educational material, research material, which I found very exciting. And I said, John, if we're going to have all these advanced educational books, we need some books that are about the basics so people can read about that first. And we thought, well, we'll do a hydrologic cycle book and talk about how groundwater fits in the hydrologic cycle. And I thought, great, that'll take a few pages. So I did that. And he said, you know, we should tie the groundwater portion to ecosystems on the surface. So we called Ying and said, can you help us with that? And she took the book and made a next draft that was just beautiful, tying it to the surface. And then John said, well, we should include chemicals moving in the groundwater in the hydrologic cycle. I said, well, that's not my expertise. So we got Warren and Doug and John all on the geochemical part and the contaminant transport part. And then the five of us worked for almost a year now on, I'd say, nearly 30 versions where we all went through them. It got longer, it got shorter, it got better organized until finally it's at a place where people that are new to groundwater that have a little bit of scientific background can read this book and see just about every aspect of groundwater, but in a very qualitative way, and get them introduced to the topic so they can read the more advanced books and those will be meaningful to them.
Very good. I can witness that this is a very compelling book. It's very nice. Well done. Congrats, guys. Next, who's next? I don't know. Doug, I'll pick
John,
you.
why don't you go and really set the philosophical tone for this book, the whole thing?
Oh, okay. So first book is the result of the most crazy and wonderful process that I think I've ever been involved with. I had listed an introduction to the hydrologic cycle on the list, and then as the realities of moving forward came on me, I realized that somebody needed to take the lead. And you know, all books have an introduction, but they're all kind of little trivial introductions done to get the reader onto the real stuff. So I invited Eileen because she's vulnerable to take it on. And we got going and tried to circulate it around. We all joined in, and it just was an amazing growth of intellectual interactions and multidisciplinary thinking. And one thing would lead to another, and then we got help from colleagues across the globe. And so it really is quite an unintended, but of course, very, very appropriate grand overview of everything to do with the hydrologic cycle, chemical, physical, contaminated, everything. A grand overview in almost 100 pages. It grew out of not an idea to do that at all. It grew out of just what happens when good collaborators get together intellectually to do something new. And Eileen basically, through all these 30 drafts, always kept it going, always picked it up with great enthusiasm, which most of us couldn't have tolerated beyond draft 8 or whatever.
Doug, you can go.
Yes, I could tell you were pointing at me. I started talking about this project as a whole with John and other folks a few years ago, and then kind of hoped it had gone away because I hadn't heard too much, and I was thinking, boy, this is going to be a lot of work. And then it came back, and I was actually ended up delighted. And so I have some other things that I've been working on for the Groundwater Project, and they were going really slowly. So it actually was a surprise, in fact, to be invited to participate in this book, and I'm very honored to be working with the rest of these authors.
Ying.
I'm the newest comer, I think, in this crowd, and I think I joined because John asked, and I made a point in my life, never say no to important people. That's what.
You need to change that.
Well, you open your heart. That's dangerous.
That's the primary reason. And the second reason that I think is important is that groundwater is not just the groundwater. Groundwater is really the anchor of the water cycle. In many ways, in its sheer volume, in its thermal and quantity, in its inertia, in its slow changing and connecting to all the conveyor belts of the Earth system. There are many conveyor belts, moisture alone in the atmosphere, in the surface we see, and then in the subsurface we don't see. And there are physical conveyor belts, there are energy conveyor belts and quantity conveyor belts, geochemical conveyor belts, sediment conveyor belts, you name it. But the one most important conveyor belt is in the subsurface that the world does not see. Here and there, we see a window of it. There's a spring popping up from nowhere. There's a well, you can look into it and you wonder where it comes from. But it's never written on the surface of the Earth. We cannot see it from satellites. There are beautiful images of the Earth, but groundwater is hidden. And but yet it is so critically important, and it is so quickly depleted, polluted. It's something we don't see, but holds so much value to science, to society. And then we are not treating it fairly. And also the surface hydrologists need to look into groundwater, and the groundwater hydrologists need to look at the surface water. The water cycle has no boundary. It does not care where it is, in the atmosphere, in the rivers, in the soil, in the groundwater. It flows wherever gravity pulls it. And I think we need to convey that idea that groundwater is the anchor. It's invisible and yet is the most important component of the water cycle. And I think that, when John emailed me, he said, well, your name was suggested to me, but I don't even know what I'm going to ask you to do. I thought, I have been studying the water cycle in the climate system and in paleohydrology, in regulating plant evolution. And I see groundwater much, much, much more valuable than just groundwater. It tells us so much that we don't know, explains plant evolution, for example. This is something we're working on. And groundwater is a fabulous subject. The world needs to know it.
Wow, that was very inspiring. I think we can wrap up the meeting now.
Yeah.
Is that okay for you guys?
There's nothing I can say after that. Boy, talk about a tough act to follow. That's I couldn't articulate that in a million years, and yet that's precisely why I was involved with it, because I thought the groundwater had been just largely focused on contaminant. All the stuff I saw in the universities, everywhere, was on contaminant failure. And I was with the USGS for 40 years, and I looked at groundwater in a much broader sense. And that's what I wanted to convey, but I never articulated it as well as Ying did right then. I cannot, I'm going to shut up because that's the final word.
Oh, Ying, tell people what your parents did, please.
My parents? My parents are retired professors now. My father is a philosopher. My mother is a economist. And that's it. And maybe perhaps more relevant to it is that growing up, we just read and read and read. Everybody picks up a book and find a corner and read. And it's a natural thing for us to read everything we can lay our hands on. Is that what
Ying adds poetry to much of our writing. And I think it comes from that background, which is different than what most of us have, a philosopher and an economist.
You're very generous, but English is my second language. I cannot even get close to being poetic.
Poetry is poetry as I understand it, but nevertheless.
Well, English is my second language as well, yes. It's good. Actually, speaking about languages, it is important that we point out here is our first meeting that we're introducing the project and the book to the people, that the book would be available for anyone who wants to translate into their mother tongue, correct? The authors are required to give the rights for people to translate the book. Our idea is to spread the news. We have heard from people, actually, I talked to some of the people that participate, and the guy from Serbia today, he said exactly the same, that groundwater is hidden and we have trouble spreading the information, and he's very willing to help us. So the idea of working on such a noble endeavor, it's quite well received by the audience. I think we're bound to have success, which is great. What do you think, guys?
Oh, Everton, if I could add then, this particular book, over the decades, people have asked me, well, Dr. Cherry, tell us about groundwater. Why is groundwater important? And then I proceed to bore them in 2 or 3 minutes, and that would be the end of that. And I think now, after having worked on this book with my wonderful colleagues, that I could actually speak to it. But more importantly, I could say, okay, here's a few minutes, but why don't you read this? It's the only read that I know of that is not too long and is written for a wide audience, a readership, that actually overviews groundwater in its intellectual glory and its importance to society. And I think that's what makes this multidisciplinary, multi-colleague effort so exciting and so satisfying.
It's very good. That's very good. Warren, can you say something about this book? And is there any relationship with the climate change or something? Could you add?
Yes, I think groundwater is an underappreciated value aspect of climate change, which is one of societal big problems right now. And I don't think it's fully appreciated by the ecologists who work in the global climate change and carbon cycle. I don't think the geomorphologists fully appreciate the role of groundwater in the denudation of the continent. They worry about sediments in streams and so on, and yet recent calculations I may suggest that it's equally important. Groundwater is equally important in terms of total mass removed from the continent. So I just think even within the scientific community, we have an educational challenge that not everybody is on board with really the significance of groundwater.
So there are many statements in this book that are surprising to me and powerful. And one of them comes from Warren's work, which is about 25% of the recorded sea level rise, in the last many decades is attributable to groundwater overpumping. Wow, you never hear about that number. And that number comes from Warren's calculations. There have been other numbers a little bit smaller. And that's one of the many numbers in the book then that I think are going to open people's eyes to the importance of groundwater. I
agree. This number we're going to use on our on our release, because this number is quite amazing. It's an important number, and people don't realize how important that is, right? I have a question for you that I asked John Warren, but since you're here now and it's a meeting here. If we get lots of water out of the continent, wouldn't that change the temperature as well? Because water retains, it's a buffer for temperature. Is that a paper or something about that? What would you say?
I don't know. Clearly, I haven't thought about it. I haven't made any calculations on that, but it's an interesting concept, whether it does impact. I just don't know. I can't answer that question.
Okay, sorry, because when we think about the Great Lakes, the region there, we have the temperature controlled by the lakes, right? Yes. So when you have a big mass of water, so I thought you could because you have the numbers, right? So it's not a.
But getting to it.
I've never made the calculations to determine, quantitatively what the role would be. That's an interesting thought. It's another one of these things that it will probably set me thinking. I'll spend the night trying to figure out how to best set that up. And incidentally, while I'm at it, thank you so much for the lead to Roberto in the Brazilian Geological Survey. Another little off thing here, but I'm trying to put together a world average groundwater composition, and Everton put me in touch of really looks like it's going to be a fantastic data set at Brazil. So
he does. He's a great guy. He's working for the Groundwater Project as well. He's writing a book for us as well. So it's okay. Fine. So it's a great guy.
Sorry,
John,
I didn't mean
you're
to
saying something.
Deviate from this, but John knows a little bit about this global picture that I'm trying to paint on the groundwater.
Can I say something about the energy?
Oh yes, please, Ying. You're welcome.
So the global Earth system models or the GCMs, the old version was the GCM, and now they have ecosystems. And so those Earth system models do not include groundwater. So the past 15 years, we have been educating the climate scientists that the water cycle goes a little deeper than 2 meters. By plants, the Amazon trees, 50 meter above ground, 20 meter below ground. That's a long pipe. That's a vertical 17-meter pipe that connects the deep hydrologic cycle with the climate, with atmospheric processes. And so when we put groundwater in those global models, it cools the land surface significantly. Why? Because of transpiration. Transpiration cools the land surface, and that's what at least one mechanism that groundwater regulates the energy cycle.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
I think with the increased, if you add for that, for example, rather than natural geogenic sense, you add to this additional pumping, that adds even more significantly additional, because most of it's used for irrigation. So this would be, again, used, that much of that excess water was originally used as probably as irrigation.
And much of our rivers are fed by groundwater. In the warm season, the water temperature can be cool because of groundwater input. That has huge implications for cold fish, aquatic animals, for salmon, for trout. And you know, the northwest of U.S., there's a lot of studies on salmon. Can salmon survive the warmer climate? And many people say no, because the sun will be beating on the water. And yes, they can survive in the shade if there are trees along the rivers. But the biggest elephant in the room is groundwater. These rivers are groundwater fed, so they are quite buffered. And they are missing that picture. Again, shows, you know, tells you what Warren said. The ecosystem scientists have very little awareness of groundwater as the source, as the buffer in so many ways, in, you know, quantity, temperature, and chemistry.
Well, I have one question, and John just is gone. Why did it take John so long to bring Ian into this project? She's so good. I'm so glad to hear her talking. Jesus. Thank you very much, Ian. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, let's change a little bit. We have to listen a bit to Doug and Eileen. Eileen, we've been working together a lot on email. You do need to know that I love your work. I love your work. You're doing a great job. It's very, very good. Many of the improvements are due to your attention and thorough work. Very good. Thank you.
Doing a fine job of promoting the project, and that's wonderful.
Thank you. Okay, Doug, what do you have to say? You're just, you know, sailing there. What are you doing? Is this a boat, motorboat?
I'm listening. And I don't normally get to talk to these folks. This is a great opportunity to do that, or at least listen. So I don't have a lot to say about this book particularly, except the following, which was when I first started working on it, I was really frustrated as an editor. And I just thought it was so fascinatingly written. And I really enjoyed reading the thing. I got involved making some of the figures or changing the figures. And that made me realize that this book, as I hope many of the Groundwater Project books, will have spectacular figures in them that will allow a reader or a peruser or somebody just glancing at it to get a lot of the ideas just from the images without reading any of the text at all. My guess is the figures will be so interesting that they will want to read the text. And that's what we're hoping. But anyway, after doing some editorial work and this and that, you know, I was invited to join, and I, like I said, I really was delighted to do that. It really has been a fantastic experience.
Good. No, but people will read. The text is very good too. And I'd like to point one thing here for our audience is that our aim in our project is to be collaborative. That we have people that are reading, and they have, if they have suggestions, they can send to the author, send to us, and we can see if that could be incorporated to the book. From my experience, you remember when we're teaching with our professors here, and you have that student that is always drawing something and is not paying too much attention. And he's a great drawer. He gets some nice things, right? And these guys are very good to produce some illustrations because they have the concepts. So we are willing to ask for collaborators to send us ideas on illustrations that could be very educative, that could be added to the book. We put the authors together, but there's this thing that is called hyperintelligence. When you have many people thinking on the same subject, people from all over the places, and they have nice ideas, we come up with a much better product, right? So the idea of the Groundwater Project is not only to like, we're the big guys and we're sending information away. It's not exactly that. We're actually willing to learn from these helpers. So if you're watching this interview and you're willing to help, you're most welcome, please. So John, what do you have to say?
Well, just to go back to a previous point. So it's called the Groundwater Project, but what the Groundwater Project is trying to do is to not only cover all of the interesting intellectual things on groundwater, it also wants to bring the importance of groundwater in all of its other respects. And we've had conversation here with respect to river water and climate and temperature and sea level rise. So So that's going to be one of the major contributions of the Groundwater Project, getting groundwater's relationship to all the other parts of the hydrologic cycle and to society's needs, including food and all of that stuff. That doesn't happen very well in universities, because universities are so siloed. The professors are siloed in their departments, and it's amazing how little collaboration goes on big universities, because we're separated from our colleagues by departments and faculties and by buildings and all of that. And I think this particular book has illustrated how that can happen so wonderfully when colleagues from, I mean, we're all groundwater scientists, the 5 of us who did the authoring, but we're all from very different areas. We've published in very different areas. The energy of getting these areas together is amazingly powerful, and that's why the chapter has been so, I think, been so fruitful and pleasurable for those of us involved.
It's true.
You know,
Eileen, you've been working so hard for that. What do you have to say about the book? Are you happy with the book after all this work?
Yes, I am. I think it's really scanned everything we need to get an introduction to people so they can go on and read the other books. And as you were mentioning earlier, all of the books will be up for multiple editions. So as we get input from our readers or new information comes to us, we'll be able to go in and revise the book and make the next edition very quickly, unlike a hard copy book.
Exactly. Since the books are all electronic versions, we don't have like print versions. It's much faster to improve the results. That's the idea. Okay.
And Everton, you've mentioned then that when these books are out there, then we're inviting anybody across the globe to point out where we got it wrong, to point out where maybe we're a little bit off track, and to, if they have better illustrations and examples, to provide them. So these books are all, as has been mentioned, they're the building blocks for a global engagement. And the book starts out, I think, to be very credible because it's authored by 5 knowledgeable people. Also, it's been reviewed by 5 or 10 people. But the ultimate credibility is going to come from then global examples, global examination, and global advice.
Exactly. Perfect. That's the idea. Not only because, well, we have something. What is a real breakthrough on our project? Because more than, much more than being a publishing house, the Groundwater Project is it's a place where you can actually collaborate and you can have feedback quickly adjusted and brought into the content. Okay, so one point is that when we open for translations, and translations are very important. I know that. You know that because English is her second language as well. When you use science in your mother tongue, science increases the reach of the language because you bring new concepts, you bring new terminology, and that improves your vocabulary and your way of thinking. So it is very important that you translate the science into other languages. So what are we gonna do? When we have people translating, they're gonna translate independently and gonna send to us to distribute the books, the final books. What we have is that we're gonna have a very good review of every book because people that are translating, they have to go in depth into the material. And so we'll actually end up with a much broader reach, and not only a reach, an improvement on what we're doing. Because, well, we've been thinking hydrogeology all our lives, but we're limited with our time and our, our dedications. We can get this much only. But with many people thinking differently, we're bound to have a new outcome that is not really done before. That's our main reach. So we're working hard to spread this books. That's my main contribution, I think, is to spread the information and to get people involved. That's why we're setting you guys together today, that we can get the feedback from our readers. Okay.
This will particularly case in figures. I think you learn by, some people learn by hearing, some people learn by reading, other people look by visual. And I think graphics are really important. And I kind of think that when you get different cultures with different skill sets, you're going to see some improvement in the graphics, different ways of looking at the same kind of data. And that's what I'm kind of looking forward to. I keep trying to think of different ways to present this material, but I'm sort of locked in with my particular background. And so I'm looking forward to that kind of a contribution.
Yes.
Everton, on another point, it's hard to write stuff down and be correct. And we're all experts and we study in our little domain and we got all our fancy degrees. But while we were preparing this chapter, it's amazing the number of paragraphs that we would have to look at and get our colleagues to look at. And they would have to get their colleagues to look at it in order to be sure that we were actually correct and saying it so that it's understandable. And that's one of the big challenges of scientific writing. And the Groundwater Project is set up to try and do that in all of its many ways. So if young students wonder why their thinking is fuzzy or why they can't understand something, that's just the way it is. Most of us who are experts in a topic are caught in fuzzy thinking or lack of understanding, in fact, much of the time. And we're working hard, we're getting our colleagues to help us.
Exactly, yeah. They think we know all. That's not true at all.
Everton, I've got a thought I'd like to toss in here, and it's come up a couple of times that we've talked about our colleagues. And you can tell by looking at the authors here, or maybe you can tell, that we come from different places, different backgrounds, different universities,
Yes.
etc. And when we talk about colleagues in our work, we're talking about people who come from anywhere.
Yes.
That we might want to, or we might know something that we need, or that would be great reviewers of something we've written. And it reminds me of it's kind of a one-line joke, but if you think about where all these people have their affiliations at rutgers.edu or mines.edu, or in my case, ucdavis.edu, I thought years ago it should just be anywhere.edu. And then, we could all have the same last portion of our email address. I don't know, but it is the characteristic of research in the last at least decade that people have come together from all over the world to work together to produce research. So doing books is just a natural extension.
Oh, that's a good point. If I could add to that, Ying mentioned that she's like a newcomer to this club, and the rest of us are kind of part of the Groundwater Club and good colleagues of mine. Eileen, then I knew of her, and she's part of the same game, but we hadn't worked together. But Ying then comes from another realm, kind of the surface water, groundwater realm. And I heard about her and invited her to join, and I was so delighted that Ying, with great expertise in her realm, would be willing to venture forth and interact with those from our club. And knowing then that if you can get accomplished people from outside your little domain to interact with you, then that really enriches the game. And that's what the Groundwater Project is all about. And Doug was mentioning now we're of the age where it can happen, anyone across the world. One of the people who contributed figures and advice on this chapter is Jimmy Zhao at the University of Hong Kong, and your colleague from Brazil. So basically, it's truly global now. Global colleagues all over contributing.
And I see this project as a grand experiment, a global experiment to transform the way we teach and we integrate and disseminate knowledge. And I don't know there are any other parallel projects to do so, to make knowledge free, and then to really get the best minds to put this knowledge package together. In this day and age, with so much junk on the internet, it is so important to put out a gem there and then lead the way and as a beacon to guide our future, scientific knowledge publishing, instead of writing books and charge college students $150 for a copy. This is free, and this is written by the world of the hyper-intelligence that Everton was talking about. This is a community-level wisdom that a single author can accomplish. And best yet, it's free. Anyone in the world, a poor child in Ethiopia, can download this book and can read it, can see the pictures and get inspired.
Students these days, then, they don't buy books. When you go into their offices, they don't have books on shelves. It's unimaginable, but they say they don't need it. They can just look it up. But what is unimaginable, when they do go to the web and look stuff up, they have no idea whether or not what they're reading is written by credible people. So with the Groundwater Project, we will get the best experts we can find. They will write stuff up, and we'll be able to tell students, okay, read that because it's written by credible people. Now, they can say, yeah, but there are other credible people in the world. The response there will be, but we've written this in a way so that if we're wrong or if we're off track, or if people don't think we've got the right emphasis, they can indicate that. They can indicate it immediately. So it's kind of reintroducing the idea of credibility and where knowledge comes from, which is kind of rapidly getting lost.
Well, I think, John, you mentioned a good point. This is a very interesting thing, because what we're doing here by opening the material for people to collaborate, it's open to the world, the peer review that we produce, right? It's not like, well, we start with the people that we know, the colleagues that are closer, but it's open to anyone to help, and that's the idea. So the improvement is expected to be, continuous. It's not something that's going to stop from here. A book is published and it's done. That's the idea, correct?
Well, I might Everton, that people could say, well, are you going to behave as censors? Is the Groundwater Project going to be the place where ideas funnel to the exclusion of other ideas? And our argument is, well, we're going to try and gain some consensus, but where there's debate, we're going to have contributions from 2 or 3 different people to make sure that where there's legitimate debate and still great uncertainty, that the different ideas can be exposed. So we're not about to censor or funnel or restrict.
I agree. I mentioned to you, John, and I haven't talked to many of the other guys here, but the idea is that, let's say you have someone in different place, he thinks he could produce a much better book than our books. One that is already in there, well, it's okay. We will accept another book. We can distribute that, because our idea is just to offer possibilities for people to learn. So our idea is not to restrict to one piece of material of each document. If it's very good, it's probably stand by itself. But some other guys may put another vision. That's always more, that enriches the whole process. So that's what we expect in the long run. Not now at the beginning, because we have so much to produce yet. But in the long run, just like any other thing, we're not competing, actually. We want to have the best, and any other options that could help are welcome. That's the idea.
Well, Everton, on that point, then, we have a rigorous peer review process. All the books that we publish are going through reviews by at least 3 or 4 other people, other experts. But the purpose of these reviews is not to censor the science. It's not to question the science, as would be the case in peer-reviewed articles. The main purpose of the reviews is to clarify the science, to clarify it for understanding, to basically make sure that the synthesis is coming through. And that's a different purpose of publishing than the peer-reviewed journals and almost all normal scientific monographs. And we're finding out that it's a hard process to get our reviews in. Authors have to struggle with all these comments and so forth, but it's working very well, I think, very synergistically and very democratically.
Good. Well, but any other candidate to produce a book would have to go through the same process. We have to work with many other authors or reviewers to get a good product. That's our idea. The idea is to be humble and produce something that other people agree with, then the book as well. Let's say it's more readable and it's easier for people to understand. That's the idea from what I grasped.
But we don't want to frighten people on this book. I think it was mentioned that it went through 30 drafts. And that's the norm. It went through 30 drafts, first of all, because we were trying to do something very, very different. And secondly, because Eileen was willing to always entertain reacting to a new suggestion. As we're feeling our way on how to get multidisciplinary books done, and this was the first one, then it led to 30 drafts. Did I get the number right? Is it 30 drafts or 29?
It's hydrogen.
But what do we have? Don't worry, because I'll put some of the pictures, you know, some of the pictures on this video, so people will see them. They're not going to be scared. No, don't worry. They're going to be actually compelled to read the book. Don't worry. And after all, it's free. They can download, take a look, and see if they like or not. Right? That's our idea. It's just come to the website and download the book. So that's what we expect. Okay, guys. I know. I'm having fun in this discussion here. I know you have your times there. I'd like you to make a final statement if you could, because our time is up here.
To say that this groundwater project has educational materials that have not been available to folks for free on the web ever before, and it should be the place to go to educate yourself or to educate your students if you're a teacher. To get the materials for groundwater education.
Very good. Doug, you're next in line now. It's change here.
Okay. First of all, I would like to just thank Eileen for her phenomenal patience and energy in making this thing happen. It takes a real marvelous person to get something through that many drafts and still remain alive. I think it is a remarkable book, and I have read it myself, you know, cover to cover several times. I highly recommend it. I think everybody would enjoy at least a quick spin.
Well, I just would comment that I think it's fantastic, the opportunity to really show a broader, much broader view of groundwater and integrate a much larger aspect of groundwater. And that appeals to me. And I hope that people will read this and understand a bit more about groundwater. I've been frustrated in the lack of fully appreciation of the role of groundwater.
Ying, please.
I would want to say that groundwater scientists should open their windows and doors and look above, look below, look left, look right. Groundwater it's basically the soul of hydrology, the soul of Earth systems. You know, it's not just a resource. It is an enabler for the Earth system to be the way it is. The dazzling diversity of life we see is because of dazzling hydrologic diversity of a dazzling hydrologic environment. That has a deep history, and that has grand stories to tell. Groundwater is loaded with ideas and inspirations. And so, and the reason that we will have many other books, several of them I will be involved in hill slope hydrology and in the ecosystems. It's not because that we reached out to other scientists to paint a broader picture, but because groundwater in itself compels us to do that, because it is actually the way groundwater functions. It sustains rivers and everything. It's not our act, is what we are told by nature, that we need to be broad and we need to think big and put groundwater in the central agenda for global policymakers, for IPCC policy making, and they guide national, international policy. Groundwater is not in that picture because our Earth system modelers are not aware of groundwater. And I think we have a long way to go to educate the world that what you do not see doesn't mean it's not there. It's critically important. I think hopefully this book and this project will enlighten people, will tell them that there's a much bigger world out there that's associated with groundwater. You will find their roots back to groundwater. I will end there.
Thank you. I'm in love with Eileen already. so well. Thank you.
Get in line. Get in line.
John, please.
Well, as I mentioned, this particular book started off as just a listing that I made as a little introduction to get us going. And it's ended up being this marvelous overview that's physical and chemical and contamination oriented, etc. So it's turned out from evolving from a little introduction to actually the flagship. It's the flagship book of the Groundwater Project, and I'm really proud to be associated with my colleague on this flagship book.
All right, thank you very much, guys. I hope this project will be a success. It already is, but we hope that we reach everything that Ian wants us to reach. That was very, very good saying. It was a pleasure having you all here, guys. And we hope we can meet together sometime soon when the next books are coming. Okay?
All right.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.